Okay, thank you very much. Again, today's subject is managing your Salesforce org, and we're going to have a demo that really covers a lot of the problems that you face as an administrator trying to manage an org, and a lot of the ways that our Snapshot application gives you solutions to those. So today, I'm Tom Appleton, and we've also got Sridhar with us today, who runs our technical services team, and he'll be doing all the heavy lifting with the demo today. And we're going to be talking about Snapshot. So some of you may be familiar with Snapshot already, but essentially it's a change and release management application for Salesforce. It does a lot, and you're going to see a lot today, but some of those things that it does do is it takes automated metadata backups of your org so that you can store those for compliance and compare them over time and compare metadata differences between orgs. We've just released a really powerful and fully functioning continuous integration engine for the tool. You'll get a little bit of a look at that today, but it's a really nice add-on that's come into the tool very recently. And we have over 24 reports that cover everything from security, compliance, org optimization, cleanup, and those are a lot of the things that you really need to be able to get your hands around to manage your org, and those are some of the things that we'll be talking about today. And we also have full compatibility with Salesforce DX, so if you've moved into the Salesforce DX world, we play very nicely with that with Snapshot as well. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sridhar, who's going to take off here on the demo and give everybody a look at managing your Salesforce org. Sridhar, off to you, sir.
Thank you, Tom. Let me share my screen here and then move right ahead. All right, you should be able to see my screen now, see my mouse moving around. So before I get into Snapshot itself, let me give you a quick rundown about our architecture. So this is a 10-year-old, 12-year-old app that's been out on AppExchange. We were one of the very first applications to get listed on AppExchange. But we have kind of followed the same architecture, which is a hybrid model. We have an AppExchange managed package, which takes care of all the licensing aspects of things, as well as keeps track of all the deployments. So it's a container for storing information about what you're moving between your orgs. And then the most important work is done on the client side. So that hybrid model managed package takes care of all the storing of migration logs and such, and the client app takes care of taking your backups, helping you see differences between your orgs, help you migrate that metadata between whatever orgs to whatever orgs, and the other facets of org management that you're going to need, namely helping you report on what's being used, what's not being used, that kind of org optimization reports, as well as security reports to help you see who is using what or not. And then finally, compliance reports help you document what you currently have, where are they being used and such. So what you're seeing in front of you is that client app right now. I'm running this on a Mac, but you could also run it on a PC. Most of our customers run it on a PC environment. So we have great support for both operating systems. So when you start off the Snapshot app, the first screen that you come to is the Salesforce login screen. So Metadata itself does not offer any additional, does not force you into any additional passwords, username, passwords, and such. We reuse Salesforce's authentication mechanism, and that's what I have done here. I've entered my credentials for my developer edition org. But if you are looking to go forward with your own sandbox, production account, or if you have your own custom domain set up, you could log into any of them, as well as DX, that which Tom was talking about. We can use DX to help you create your Scratch orgs, pull and push metadata into Scratch orgs and such as that, right? And typically when you start off, you would be going into the beginner mode, the getting started mode. Here I am going into a power user mode just to kind of help you see all the different pieces available within Snapshot. So when I click OK, it validates my license and then lets me into the tool and brings me to my canvas. My canvas has a great visual deployment pipeline already defined. So what you're seeing here, these green icons are essentially content repo representation. So it could be Bitbucket, Git, or TFS, SVN. Doesn't really matter what kind of repo you have. We have the ability to connect with them and then pull metadata from them and then connect that up with your Salesforce org. So these blue icons are actually Salesforce org representations. And these org representations gives us the flexibility to go create backups of any org that you want, as well as connect these orgs using these highly visual deployment pipelines and then move metadata between them, right? So that all said, how do you get started? You get started using this tool palette by simply starting off with, let's start small. Let's start with an org itself. When you bring that over, it starts logging into an org. You can actually just type in any org credential that you want. You want to go into a UATA, or I just want to back up my developer edition for trial purposes, and then I'll move over to my production org. Wherever you want to go, you could move forward, and that lets you access any piece of metadata that you have in your org. Could be managed packages that you have, profiles, permission sets, custom objects, pretty much anything else, including your reports, dashboard, email templates, documents. Everything is now covered using Snapshot. And all of these can be backed up to your local machine as what we call a snapshot itself. So it's reaching out to Salesforce, bringing that metadata down to your local machine. And these things can be scheduled. It's very normal for our customers to look at this and say, I want to start actually tonight. I'm going to set it up for 9 o'clock. I want that to be backed up every week. So every week on, this is a Wednesday, it's going to wake up on a Wednesday there at 9 p.m., create a metadata backup of your org itself, put it away, and then go to sleep. And you could set up multiple jobs. So typically we see weekly backups created for your production orgs and daily backups for your high value developer orgs. Maybe there's a lot of changes going on there, so you want to take a backup of that more often than your production org itself. Or if you want to change it up and say, I want to take a backup every 12 hours, 6 hours, whatever you prefer, we have a way of getting that here. So what does that mean? This means you now have access to some features that can help you get some disaster recovery features put in place, right? The disaster recovery scenarios put in place. In case something happens to your org, or you want to go see how your org was structured when you started the project off and compare that to how your org is set up today. All those kind of scenarios can be satisfied because this backup is now saving the state of your org configuration in a very accessible area, right? With those backups, I talked about how you can see those differences there. You can see the differences within the same org by simply right-clicking these org representations and looking at time series. Time series gives me a way of seeing all the backups I have created in this particular org. This is my developer org. I use this a lot, so you see a lot of backups available right here. But what that's useful for is it helps me see differences. I can go all the way back. So I created this org and started playing around with it, back in February. Now I have some backups here that was created yesterday. I want to see those differences. And I can see wherever there are differences there, we have lit up metadata types, and I can simply drill down on them and see those differences. The reds tell me that there are existing metadata that has changed, and when those changes were done. There were new metadata introduced in the latter stages there that was not present when I started the project off. And there were other things that were created that was later deleted because it was deemed unnecessary. So anywhere there is a difference within the same org, we now have a great way of surfacing that, and this is all exportable. But of course, we are doing that only for one particular metadata type. You can always select multiple and see those as well. So a typical scenario where this might come in useful is for you to come in and see those differences in your production org. You have multiple release management teams or multiple release managers that are pushing changes into your production org. And this is a great way for you to get a daily report of all the changes that are going in your production org, and that can be scheduled as well and sent out to you in an email or a chatter post, whatnot, only when there are differences reported. So you're not bombarded with information every day. You get notified only when there are changes, right? So great way for notifications of these changes coming to you, so you don't have to go out there, do some extra work to get, kind of keep track of these changes. That stuff comes to you, so that way if there are some metadata that you are working on that just got updated in production, you can reconcile your changes before you start moving your changes over. Safety mechanism. That's really what we're going for. Now, that is all with a particular org. What happens if I want to compare multiple orgs and see those differences between them, right? But before I move forward, one quick thing I just realized I kind of failed to mention is these green arrows. There are some different colors that you're seeing there in these arrows themselves. There are typically three colors. You will see reds, greens, and then these browns. Reds obviously means that when I'm trying to set something up and trying to deploy things over, something failed. So it's marked in red. So you can kind of see a visual representation as to how metadata is flowing through your deployment pipeline, what worked, the ones that work are displayed in green, and stuff that has been configured, and maybe I've run some validations, but they are not in any sort of danger as such, so they remain in the browns. So reds are problems, greens are good to go, and browns are just being validated or staying in ready state. They're not really readily being used right now, right? But these connections I make, you could use them for various purposes. When I right-click on these things, you can deploy metadata between them. You can do quick deployments, rollback deployments, as well as execute. This is the newest feature there that Tom was talking about. It's a continuous integration. We'll go into that shortly here, but before you go that, we do realize most of the work here is done as prep work, getting ready for that deployment. So we have comparisons to help you understand the differences between your orgs so that you can manage that better. And these comparisons show you differences in red with the triangle there. New stuff, additions, are shown in green with the plus, and anything that has not really changed is left in gray with the circle. And you can see this at any level that you want. You can very easily drill down and see those differences for fields or classes or profiles, field level security, whatever. That also incorporates an XML diff. So you can quickly switch between different things and see those differences, jump between them. So it's very easy for you to see all that stuff right here. That extends over, by the way, for those profiles and permission sets that I talked about. And there is one thing unique that we did here for profiles and permission sets. We display them as matrices. So right now you're looking at object permissions. You can see any part of the permission set here as well. Your permission sets are listed vertically. And because I'm looking at object permissions, objects are listed horizontally, and the matrix tells me there are some differences there, and the differences are noted in red. And then new stuff, new permission sets have been created here that are not available on the other side. Those are displayed in green. So great way for you to kind of keep track of any and every part of your org itself in a very interactive way. And that extends to a report as well. We do have metadata differences report that can generate the report of any and all of those metadata, get those exported out as a report. Again, just like before, those can be scheduled and then sent to you in an email or chatter. So typical scenario, you have multiple deployment teams that are updating the same staging org, and then you as the in a prime release guy is designated to migrate that stuff from staging into production. So this gives you a great way of running continuous diffs between your staging and production. And whenever it highlights a difference, you get that as an email. So great way for you to keep track of that stuff and let the system notify you of changes, as opposed to you coming in every single day, running a report, identifying the differences there, and then if there are no differences, walking away. So it saves you time and resources in managing your org. Now, with those changes understood, let's actually run a quick deployment to help you see what's going on. When you start that deployment, again, a right click and then go into deploy. The first thing we have designed Snapshot to do is not just start the deployment itself, but before you go in there, it goes into your setup audit trail as well as your deployment history. And that's both on the source as well as the destination to mine and tell you what things changed since you created your backup. So let's take a step back, look at it from a change sets perspective, right? So let's put that into a scenario. So you are a release manager, you're using change sets, you're not using Snapshot. So you created a change set, you've uploaded it into Salesforce, and you're waiting for that upload to finish. But in the meantime, somebody came in and fixed something. And that could be pretty much any change there. And somebody went in there and they changed the tabs in the custom app called Snapshot. Or what is the other change here? Permission set. Somebody came in there and mucked with one of your permission sets. Now in change sets, because you started that upload, you have no way of getting notified that, hey, things are changing after you started that upload of change set. Whereas with Snapshot, as you start the deploy, we mine the setup audit trail and tell you, guys, there is a problem here. There are changes being made. What do you want to do? You can, of course, turn around and say, I want to update my backup and move forward with that, or I can choose to ignore these changes and move forward with whatever I currently have. That decision is on me, but I have the flexibility to make that decision armed with the appropriate information. Right? A great safety mechanism, sure, you're always armed with the latest and the greatest data. Right? In this case, I'm going to simply ignore those changes and start the migration. Now, any and all parts of your metadata types can be modified using Snapshot. Right? I can clear it out. I can add whatever I prefer. You can touch pretty much anything, and based upon difference. So I can say, I want to add these 4 objects. And when I say objects, I mean every part of your object. You don't have to build your object, taking a shell of an object and populating it with certain fields and certain record types and things like that. When you select the object, the entire object is selected. Or you can drill down and say, no, I don't want to actually move the entire object over. I want to select only certain fields here. Right? I'm adding in a changed field as well as adding in a new field. Flexibility to let you decide what makes sense for you. Or maybe you want to make changes, in a little bit more grand manner. There's multiple things there. You don't want to go through these metadata types one by one. That's perfectly okay as well. You can select multiple metadata types and use our built-in option to help add all missing elements or all add different elements. Lets you decide what makes sense for you and remove anything that it adds in or add something else. It gives the power of the selection in your hands. Nothing is forced on you. And that it goes over towards some fun stuff like profiles as well. You can add or create profiles, and that includes partials. I can go into field level security, choose a couple of things, and move only that. So great way of letting me decide what makes sense for me while knowing what things have been updated or not. And I say I know what things are being updated or not because I can select anything and see a inbuilt XML diff. So me as a developer, I can keep track of these changes and then create a change set that makes sense for me, right? And one of the cool things that Snapshot does is whatever you are choosing right here is all stored on the Salesforce site. So this can be reused as well, right? We'll see that in a minute there. But before we go there, select anything that makes sense for you. That includes selections based upon relationships as well. I can select individual fields or entire objects there and then choose based upon related items, all page layouts, all search settings or tabs, anything that used this particular object, right? And then change those things. I don't want to migrate these over, remove things out of the list. It's completely within your purview to do that. Deletions as part of your migrations are part of it, or you can just start your migration and start moving things that you had selected, both creates as well as deletes as part of your migration. For your migrates, you can validate, execute a transactional deploy, even execute a partial deploy. These are those scenarios there when you get kind of a little bit desperate because you just need to get something into the hands of the QA guy so they can start their job while you turn on and figure out the rest of the problems there. That's your option for you. So it's a great way of executing as much as possible while you turn around debug stuff. Obviously, you don't want to do this for a production org, so we will automatically detect if your destination is a production org and gray those options out, right? So for production orgs, you can validate or transactional deploy only. But you still don't lose any of the other options there. You can run Apex tests or not. You can apply transforms. These are metadata transforms, great ways of picking up things and then changing those values as part of your migrations. Great way, great usage I've seen a lot is for your workflow email alerts. Those distribution lists that you're targeting, when they go into production, maybe they need to be targeting a different production list. So that way, you're not sending out just test emails. You can flip all that stuff out as part of the migration, which means your post-deploy steps come down drastically. Or removing unnecessary references. Again, let me put that into a scenario. So you're a developer, you are selecting items for migration. You've updated a particular class there, so you selected that class, you're selecting a couple of page layouts, but you conveniently leave behind those dev test fields that you have created to make sure everything is working fine. But what happens if those fields are part of your page layout? If you migrate that page layout over, you're going to get an error, right? And that's really where the remove references come into play. It automatically detects that those fields are part of the page layout, but you're not moving those fields over, so it intelligently removes those things out. And it can do that for profiles, permission sets, page layouts, record types, compact layouts, a whole bunch of different things without you having to do anything other than check a box. And the best part about all of this stuff is any migration that you do is tracked in a single place. So imagine anybody migrates from dev to test or test to stage, stage to production, whatever org to whatever org, all of those deployment logs come into a single org, which means you now have a great way of showing your auditor chain of custody reports. Mr. Auditor, my field got created in dev, went to test stage, and then to production. Did not break chain of custody anywhere. It's great for your compliance reports, and you don't have to sit there and compile all of this stuff. Snapshot takes care of that for you. The other part of it, other facet of that is what happens if you migrate from dev to test, but you don't, you're not responsible for future migrations, test to stage, stage to production, all of that stuff. That change list that you created right here is all stored on the Salesforce org. So someone else can open that up, pick that exact package that you migrated over, and then push that onto staging and then onto production. And that's actually how our continuous integration works. It's designed to pick up your deployments and then stream them downstream, or you can turn around and say, I don't want to run this off of my deployment change list right here. I would like you, Snapshot, to figure out the differences between orgs or differences between my Git and my Salesforce org itself, and then execute a migration. That continuous integration that we have not talked about yet, you have all kinds of options there, but you still get those nice logs to help you see who migrated, what they migrated, when they migrated, all of that good stuff. And if you are setting up manual migrations, you can set it up to execute on a different date time. So you can say Friday, 9 o'clock, start this migration, deploy that metadata. If everything works, send me an email. Deployment actually went through, and then take a snapshot. So that way, if you need to come in and show your auditor, here are the changes that made, and here is how the org is structured before and after the migration, it can do all of that stuff for you. Right? So great ways of keeping track of all your changes and executing those migrations. Now let's move on to some of the more interesting org management stuff that you would do. So thus far, we have talked about how to take backups of your orgs, how to look at differences within the same org, and how to compare different orgs and then migrate things over. So this is available for any org under your purview. But let's say you have to document these things. Again, with the right click, we have various reports to help you see those, see that setup. Starting with a data dictionary. Right? Data dictionary is used commonly for our compliance documentation. Our customers use this stuff for FDIC, HIPAA, SOX kind of compliance regulations there, as well as resource discussions. Mr. Manager, last year we had 5,000 reports. Now we have 7,500 reports, plus an explosion in the number of Apex classes that we have. Here is how my org is structured. Here is how many classes I have, reports I have, translations. Everything is nicely documented. So great ways of having those discussions using our reporting without you having to sit there and count everything out manually. Org limits. How close are you to those limits there? So in case there's some, if you're too close to the limits and such, you have to go have a chat with Salesforce support and such. You could do all of that stuff. Object and field properties, these include things like pick list values, whether they are from standard value set or global value set. Everything is documented. What things are required or not. Default values, descriptions, help text, actual formulas behind those formula fields. Everything documented for you, so you don't have to keep typing out the stuff in Excel and submitting that to those auditors every quarter. That also includes relationships. Where are my metadata being used? What objects, what fields are these being used where? What Apex classes, what Apex triggers, reports, report types. You can add anything you want. Just for kicks here, I'm going to add page layouts, right? So add anything you want. You can run a quick report, and I'm running this report real time here just to show you how great it is, how fast it is to execute these reports, and it's going to crunch through my data there and then come back. So 540 some Apex classes, 162 some Apex pages, a whole bunch of information about my org itself. My org limits, whatever I ask for it to document, my object and field properties, including my names, labels, type of field, pick list values, whether they are required or not, what the default values are, descriptions, help text, formulas behind my formula fields, right? Everything documented for you in seconds without you having to do pretty much anything. And that includes those relationships that I talked about. Fields, where are they being used? What page layouts, what report types, classes, triggers, everything documented for you in an easily exportable format, right? And that can be scheduled as well. Create this report whenever a new snapshot is created, or create this report for my production org once a month, get that email to me on this particular group. You don't have to do anything. That information comes to you. It's as easy as forwarding that to your auditor, getting back to work instead of sitting there and typing all this stuff out in Excel. Org management made easy. There are many more to extend that functionality. I talked about one report here, fields versus page layout, record type versus pick list, dependent versus controlling pick list. Great ways of understanding how your org is structured. But what happens if you need to start optimizing your org? There are a lot of things that happened in your org. People came in and out of your org there. Things might have gotten created for reasons that might have changed. We have great optimization reports. Field usage to help you see what fields are being used or not. Let me quickly run it for my account object here. So it goes through every field to tell you how many records have actual data entered in there. Some of them could have default values entered in. Some of them could be left empty, or then decent data entered. It goes and figures all that stuff out for every field that you have out there. So when this finishes here, let's quickly get that taken care of. Almost done. There you go. Perfect. So list of fields, their types, and if there's a formula field there, it's denoted as well. And then the default empty distinct values to see. Let's actually pick something up that has some decent distincts. Let's see what's there. Billing country code. Okay, let's look at billing country code. So what this says is billing country code has 85 defaults, 12 empty records, and then 10 distinct values. So let's drill into it, see what that's about. So 10 distinct values. The most used one value is US, which I'm guessing is the default there, matches with what it tells me. The next most used value is empty, 12, and then the distribution. So this gives me the kind of information that I might need to maybe look at it and say, well, yeah, most usage there is US. Maybe I need to focus a little bit more of my effort on US and target some of my marketing efforts towards more the US than wasting money here, which is not bringing me enough value. Or maybe from a sales ops perspective, I might want to get more information about this to say US, but which region in US, which state, maybe I need to drill in, get some more information for my sales guy. It's designed to help you understand and foster those kind of meaningful discussions, right? And you can do this at a field level or at a pick list value level. That's all from a data perspective. You could do that same thing from a metadata perspective as well. I'm just launching the Forgotten Assets report. What Forgotten Assets report does is, like you would expect, it helps you track unused metadata. For pretty much any metadata there, I'm running this for the email templates. What it does, it shows me a list of email templates that don't have any references. They are not really being used. There's a whole bunch of other metadata email templates that I have that's being used in workflows, approval process, auto response rules, portals, whatnot. But what I really care about are these email templates that have no references. So think of this as Salesforce Optimizer on steroids. It's a great way to identify that negative space, what is not being used, and then drill down and decide what do you want to do about it, right? Can be for pretty much any metadata type, email templates, groups, queues, permission sets, whatever you have there, it lists them all out. You can get a report of it export out. You can also schedule them and say, run this every month, get me the results so I can decide what to do about it. Right? Various org optimization reports. We also have great security focused reports, starting with profiles versus permission sets. Great way of documenting what I currently have. I ran it just a few minutes ago here for my guy Josh Hyde that you see here. Let's go into display report and see a detailed report right here. So what this says is Josh, looking at object permissions here and the account object, Josh is assigned to the custom standard user profile that gives him no access to the account object. But then there are various permission sets that are defined that escalate that no access to give him various permissions. And here are the final results. So Josh has create, delete, edit, read access to the account object. Can I figure this out without Snapshot? Absolutely. But amount of time that I would spend in figuring out all the profiles that are there, all the permission sets that have been assigned to users, and trying to identify the final security assigned to a particular user, or even worse, particular set of users, is enormous. At the end of the day, what we are targeting using Snapshot is your productivity. Do everything that you are currently doing in a much more productive, resource-focused way, so you're not wasting time and resources doing your everyday job. Right? Again, all of these reports, just like before, you can simply right-click and export them. Right? There are other reports from a security aspect as well, focusing on your security health check, record level security, as well as user activity timeline. This helps you keep track of what your users and admins have been doing in your org. It looks at login history, looks at setup audit trail to help you see what your admins are doing, as well as if you guys have turned on Shield in your org. It has the ability to mine your event monitoring logs to help you see what's going on in your org. We recently had a interesting event there with one of our customers where one of their sales guys, high value sales guys, enterprise sales guys, had quit recently for no reason there. And when they went through the history, what they found out using Snapshot, they were able to track. He ran a report, exported that report, and he walked away. That report turned out to be a pipeline report. So then they were able to pull him aside and have a chat with him to figure out why he exported his pipeline, a list of all opportunities that's in his pipeline, and then walked away. Right? Those kind of security events can be easily figured out using Snapshot, because Snapshot crunches through your Salesforce org in a very easy, resource-focused manner there, and then comes up with reports that can be scheduled as well, so that the information comes to you and you don't have to go out and do a whole bunch of stuff to keep track of how your org is being used, being managed, and such. Right? So before I move forward into a completely different direction there, so what we have talked about thus far is we've talked about how your org can be backed up for insurance and compliance reasons there, how you can identify the changes made within your org over time, or connect orgs and compare and identify those differences, deploy those differences, document those differences, and then how everything is kept track of, so you can see how your org metadata is being moved downstream from dev to test to integration test to production, things like that. Right? Then we went over and started talking about some of the reporting capabilities, how your org can be documented for compliance or for security reasons there, or the org optimization reports to help you understand how what pieces of the orgs are not being used and such. As the last piece there, I want to quickly walk through our latest introduction to the Snapshot world, which is continuous integration. Again, for those uninitiated into the concepts of continuous integration simply is a concept that helps you constantly move, first identify changes that were made to the org or into content repositories, move those changes from your source of truth, whatever that might be, downstream into various orgs, so you are always up to date with changes that are being made in development and whatever has been tested into downstream orgs, so you are kept up to date. And more importantly, identify problems that come up with those developments there, because one developer's changes might not immediately work with somebody else's changes. So you need a way of quickly identifying those changes and resolving those conflicts. So Snapshot already, through its compare and deploy metadata, helps you identify those differences there, then move that metadata between your content repos or your Salesforce orgs. We are essentially helping you do that in a much more automated fashion using continuous integration. You can launch continuous integration from pretty much anything. In this case, it's moving from Salesforce org to Salesforce org. You can also connect that same thing from Git to a Salesforce org. When you are pulling metadata from Git into Salesforce org, and by the way, the stuff that goes into Git could be in DX format or in Salesforce metadata format, you can pretty much pick and choose what things you want to continuously move. You can say, I want to move only objects and profiles, or I want to move everything over. You decide what makes sense. And anything that has been defined there, you can decide if you just want to do all the metadata deployment options that you saw before. You want to do only validate and notify people of problems, or you actually want to move things over, or you want to do a partial deploy. All of those settings are available to you, and it still keeps track of all of those changes that come from your Git into your Salesforce org, and document that into a single Salesforce org, which is a licensing org that to keep you updated as to what changes that are available. If you are moving things between Salesforce org to Salesforce org, those deployments that you did from Git into your Salesforce orgs, those can be reused as well, because moving from Salesforce org to Salesforce orgs, you get multiple options. You can move those changes based upon deployments that was previously made into a particular Salesforce orgs, or you can tell the system to not use those deployment history to detect changes using setup audit trail and then execute those migrations. Both options are available, and you can still decide who is allowed to execute migrations and what options are available. In this case, you can define your own custom settings. Maybe things from QA to staging needs different transforms as opposed to what was originally offered when you migrated from dev to test, right? Or you want to simply reuse whatever settings were previously applied and just continue migrating those options downstream, right? So great ways of streaming your updates all the way to wherever you want to move them over. For example, if you want to take them all the way to production and actually achieve continuous deployment, or you want to bring it all the way to the staging org, the integration test org, and stop there. So achieve continuous integration and then finally execute a manual migration from staging into production using all those deployments that were deployment chain sets that were previously used to migrate from dev to test, test to staging. Whatever option you choose, Snapshot works with you, because Snapshot uses the same options whether you are doing a manual deployment or continuous integration. No particular process is thrust upon you. You decide what process makes sense for you, and you decide what deployment pipeline you want to decide, you want to implement, and you decide what workflow to create and what workflow to export and hand over to your developers and force things on them. It's the control is in your hands with Snapshot. With that, let me hand that back to you, Tom. Any questions that people might have?
Thank you, Sridhar. All right, so we've had a couple questions come in along the way. If you as we do a quick Q&A here, if you have any questions during the session or while we're doing the Q&A, please put those into the Q&A and we'll try to get to those as quick as we can. I am going to just very quickly here share my screen so you guys can see upcoming events that we've got. Here we go. Okay, so just a couple things really quick. One thing is we need to, if you need to get the latest on what we're doing, what events we're attending, webinars, etc., you can follow us on Twitter. We're at Metazoa4SF. So you can jot that down and follow us on Twitter. We also release information on new features. We have a pretty rapid release cycle, so things like the continuous integration stuff Sridhar was talking about today, you'll get updates on that on our Twitter as well. So that's always a good place to go. And lastly, if you would like a demo or maybe a private demo to give you some more detail on how you can use Snapshot for your company, please reach out to us. You can email us at sales@Metazoa. We have some phone numbers up there. You can tweet us if you prefer. And we're going to be at a bunch of upcoming events. Of course, Dreamforce, we will be there. We're at booth 242 in the Customer Success Expo in Moscone South, which, if you've ever been to Dreamforce, is one of the billions of rolling planes of booths out there. And in November, we're going to be at Northeast Dreamin'. So if you're in the Northeast and you're going to Northeast Dreamin', we'll have a booth there. That's in Manchester, New Hampshire. Beautiful time of year to be there, by the way. And also in November, actually, I kind of have my dates swapped here. Really before that, just before that in November, we'll be at Florida Dreamin', which is in Orlando, Florida, on November 1st and 2nd. So if you want to get some warmer weather in November, that's a great place to head to. So with that, let me go through. We have a couple of questions here. We'll try to get to as many of these as we can. So just give me 1 second here while I dial these up. Okay. Okay, so first question. I need to merge 2 orgs. Can Snapshot help me with that, or is it restricted to one production org only? I can actually answer that, or Sridhar can answer that, but the answer is that Snapshot has the ability to work across all of the production orgs that you have access to. Might change from a licensing perspective, but as far as functionally, we can work with any Salesforce org that you have access to. Sridhar, you would concur with that, right, sir? Absolutely. We can work across production org boundaries there. There is no technical restriction. Thank you, Sri. This one's for you, Sridhar. For your continuous integration implementation, can I use my Bitbucket as a source, or am I restricted to only Git? Great question. Yeah, you can absolutely use any content repository that you have, Git, Bitbucket, or if you have other things that you have, SVN or a homegrown application, doesn't really matter. As long as it's reachable externally, so there's an API to do that, you can absolutely integrate with that and pull metadata from it. And an extension of that question is you can also use Salesforce Orgs as your source of truth. A lot of people we've talked to, some people are kind of getting into that concept and storing that metadata in a Git repository, but then I see a lot more people
storing only their code in a content repository like Git or Bitbucket or something like that. And then the rest of the metadata is actually stored in their Salesforce orgs themselves. And that's perfectly okay with Snapshot. We can actually combine the two and say, whenever code gets updated into Git, bring that into this source of truth Salesforce org and combine that code with your objects and page layouts and profile settings and things like that, and then propagate those combined changes to the rest of the org. So Snapshot gives you that flexibility to let you decide what makes sense for you. It doesn't force a particular way on you. That's one key difference between what Snapshot does and the way Jenkins or something like that works.
Thanks, Sridhar. Got one last question here. Where are your backups stored?
Just to be very clear, when you say backups, I want to make sure we're all on the same page there. We are talking about only metadata backups, so it's your org configuration. They're all stored on your infrastructure. That's another one of the key elements about Snapshot. Snapshot is a product that is completely running on the customer's infrastructure. So from a security perspective, nothing is leaked out of your infrastructure over to ours. We're not running a service. We provide the product and we provide the support for that product. So all the backups that you are creating, all the migrations that you are executing, all those diff logs that get generated, everything is on your side. So the backups that are created are stored on your machines. Those deployment logs are stored in your Salesforce logs. The diff reports, if you want that emailed out, whatnot, they're all staying on your email service. So from a security perspective, you don't have to have any concerns whatsoever.
Great. Thank you, Sridhar. And thanks everybody for attending today. We really appreciate it. If you're out and about at these Salesforce events, please come see us. If you'd like a demo, please let us know. We'd be glad to give you one. And I hope we gave everybody some good info on managing your Salesforce org. And everyone have a great week.
Thank you.